My name is John Williams, a 30-year-old businessman. There's nothing special to note about me. I'm just working as an office clerk at a large wholesaler for alcohol. We don't have a store, but we do deliver beer and wine on credit to a wide variety of eateries, such as bars and izakayas. Each delivery person is in charge of a truck, and when morning comes, they load up barrels of beer and deliver to the stores they're in charge of. As for me, I'm working in an office with only women, handling things like processing credit slips and various chores. I think I've been placed here because they need at least one male hand in the office. Still, it's true that I often have bad experiences because I'm looked down on by people like the driver, the procurement personnel, and the warehouse manager. On top of that, the general affairs department is a women's garden. I feel uncomfortable. I often feel stressed because it feels like I'm caught on the horns of a dilemma. But the reason I'm still at this company is because not everything is bad. I have many colleagues I get along with, and I often get treated well by our regular customers. There are times for ups and downs. It would be the same no matter where I work. The change in my life happened this spring. The cause was a new department manager who joined the company in the middle of the term. He was a tough guy with a background in finance, having served as a branch manager of a regional bank. He had a tendency to try to settle everything with numbers. The department manager was rough from the start. Perhaps he felt pressured to produce results because he was hired in the middle of the term. His demands on us were too high. Suddenly, the previously laid-back atmosphere in the office started to get tense. According to the section chief secretly told me, it seems that the director is suggesting personnel cuts to the president. Indeed, there have been fewer drinking parties recently, and opportunities for outside drinking have been lost. It's a big blow to our company, which delivers alcohol to restaurants. I knew that sales were sluggish. When I heard about this from the team leader, I had a bad feeling. This was because, as far as the director was concerned, my performance seemed to be at rock bottom, and I was well aware that he had me in his sights. Perhaps being the only man among the clerks might give the impression of being incompetent. I had the impression that I was doing a decent job, but the director didn't seem to recognize my efforts at all. In a month after the director took office, the discussions about reduction began. It started with soliciting voluntary retirees. Apparently, no one expressed a desire to leave. The director then prepared a list for the reduction. My name was at the top. He subtly applied pressure, saying, "It's not mandatory, but if you care about the company." Besides me, several delivery personnel and assistants were chosen. It seemed like an arbitrary selection on the director's part. The warehouse keeper's name was on the list, and he was outraged. And rightly so. If the warehouse keeper quit, the company would be thrown into chaos. Because no one else can find a single bottle of wine in the huge warehouse. The president didn't seem to like the list either, but he had difficulty expressing his opinion to the director, who was an elite from the banking world. Even those whose names were on the downsizing list didn't willingly apply to resign just because their names were there. The company atmosphere was like, let's ignore the list, but the director didn't like that. Salespeople aren't in the company during the day. During the day, the director's target was me, the only one left in the office. Even when he didn't have anything to do, he kept loitering around my desk and nitpicking. I sincerely wished he would just stay cooped up in his office. Are you doing only that job every day? You have a tons of work because you're slow. The director would lean over my work and scold me in an unnecessarily loud voice. I guess he wanted everyone in the office to hear. Every day, the office atmosphere got worse because of his yelling. And the director blamed it on me. He said that the reason the employee's motivation isn't increasing is because I'm in the company. I was stunned to be told that being called incompetent and a burden to the company every day was really wearing me down. My stress was reaching its limit. I'm convinced that the reason I blacked out and collapsed while trying to get up from my chair at the office was due to the director. I don't remember anything after falling, but apparently I was quickly rushed to the hospital by an ambulance. I heard from my colleagues that I had been unconscious and appeared to be suffering since I collapsed. It turns out, stress was indeed the direct cause of my collapse. It was a result of a dreadful pattern of stress leading to insomnia and overwork. When they performed the tests upon my emergency arrival at the hospital, the attending physician told me that there seemed to be other worrisome symptoms, which surprised me a bit. It turned out I would have to continue with further diagnostic tests. The results of these thorough tests revealed early-stage colon cancer. Receiving a cancer diagnosis was quite a shock, but I was a little reassured when the doctor told me that since it was in the early stages, there was a high likelihood of complete recovery with surgery. A hospital stay for tests turned out to be a much longer hospitalization than I anticipated, which was bothering me. Just as I thought my hospital stay might drag on a bit longer and contacted my office, the document that the secretary, now named as Nancy, brought me was early retirement papers. She looked very apologetic as she handed them to me, saying she was told by the director to deliver them. "Thank you, who've asked the nasty task." When I spoke to Nancy, who had brought the documents, she told me, "You should just ignore such papers." Of course, I don't want to take early retirement. I shoved the envelope into the drawer of the bedside table in my hospital room. "John, we'll take your temperature and blood pressure now." The nurse came named Kathy, replacing Nancy in the room. The first time I saw her, I was so struck by her beauty that I didn't even realize when the injection was over. Yes, please go ahead." I get overly nervous when Kathy comes in. Her being extremely beautiful is one reason why I get so nervous. On top of that, she never smiles. She's called Iron Mask by the inpatients. It seems her fellow nurses also call her that. Kathy's expressionlessness and her good looks make her appear doubly intimidating. It's not that she's cold or anything like that to the patients. She's a strict yet kind nurse. The young attending physician told me that he's most afraid of being scolded by her. She doesn't raise her voice but seems to be able to express her anger in a quiet, matter-of-fact way. I thought I would be terrified if it were me. "Your pulse is a bit fast. Are you not feeling well?" Kathy, who was taking my pulse, quietly said so. It seems my pulse quickens just by having her near me. I was a little amazed at how nervous I was. "I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me." As I hastily said that, Katie stared at me fixedly. And then, she let out a small sigh. I started to panic, wondering if I had disappointed her. But her sigh was not one of disappointment. "Don't just dismiss things lightly as okay. You're here to fight a disease, remember. If you're feeling bad or if there's even a slight difference from your norm, make sure to tell us," Kathy said with a serious expression. Then, she deeply bows in my direction, apologizing for her inadequacy. "Wait, why? You don't need to apologize for anything, Kathy. I understand there's a certain atmosphere around me that makes it hard for you to open up. I'm really sorry about that." I wonder if Kathy knows what people call her behind her back. I gently look at her face, wondering if she's hurt. Her usual expressionless face is there. I'll be a good patient." My words slip out awkwardly, as I don't know what to say. Iron-faced Kathy's eyes widen in surprise. Then she quickly returns to her usual expression and simply responds, "I appreciate that." I suddenly feel embarrassed and couldn't say a single word until Kathy left the room. Hospital life is surprisingly busy with continuous tests before surgery. Today, I didn't return to my room until past 3 p.m. after the tests. Dragging my test-weary body into my room, I find that there's already someone there. It's my boss. Just seeing him doubles my exhaustion from the tests. He notices me return to the room and, without any words of consolation, just says, "Hey." I don't feel like responding, but he's still my boss, even if he's not the most pleasant. As an employee, I don't have much room to argue. Quietly, I just sat down on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Director." That's the unwritten rule for employees, I suppose. My apology was met with a condescending nod from the director. "I've heard you're in for a long stay. Have you received the early retirement forms? Why haven't you submitted them yet? The company would be better off without deadweight like you." He spoke to me as though I were a child, which got under my skin. I must have let my irritation show. The director gave a nasty grin. He was trying to rile me up, I knew that, but his attitude was hard to stomach. "You came all this way to tell me that. I'm sorry for the trouble, but I have no intention of retiring early." I tried to choose my words carefully, trying to stay as calm as possible. Really, I wanted to shout him down and send him packing. The director smirked as if he could read my thoughts, and he didn't stop. If I caused a scene here, he might use that as an excuse to fire me. The tension hung in the air between the director and me, like a standoff. The one who shattered that tension was Nurse Kathy. "Excuse me, I believe I asked you to call me with the nurse call button once you return from your tests. Have you forgotten?" The hospital room door burst open, and in strode Nurse Kathy, glancing back and forth between the director and me. "I'm sorry, but can you please leave the room?" Her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable authority in it. She shot the director a frosty stare, explaining, "He's tired from his tests." What a rude nurse. I'm this man's superior, and the director rose from his chair, glaring at Nurse Kathy. But she simply pointed to the door and repeated, "Please leave." "Boss, that doesn't matter here. This is a place where you follow the doctor's and nurse's instructions. You think being a boss works everywhere." The director's face turned beech red at that. It was like she'd called him out for flaunting his petty power. "How dare you? I'll remember your name." With a parting shot, the director stormed out of the room like he was running away. I listened to the receding footsteps, letting out a sigh of relief. "Would you like to lie down?" Kathy, as if nothing had happened, helps me to comfortably lay down. After laying down, all the exhaustion came to me. "Why don't you take a nap until it's time for dinner?" As she suggests this, she pulls the blanket up to my shoulders. I can't help but feel a little shy. "Thank you. That man, he's a bit of a problematic boss. I appreciate you sending him away." As Kathy is about to leave the room, I call out to her, and she slowly turns around. In her flat tone, she says, "It's my job." Right, but still, I wanted to say thank you. Upon hearing this, her hand, which was on the doorknob, stops. And slowly, she turns back towards me. Kathy looks at me with a strange expression. The moment I thought her feelings briefly showed on her face returns to its usual expressionless, iron mask. Without saying anything more, she leaves the room. Fortunately, the surgery was successful, and I continued my treatment towards recovery. My body was at its limit due to stress. Even after the surgery, I was told to rest properly. During my lengthy hospital stay, I set a goal for myself. That was to see Kathy's smile by the time I was discharged. I really wanted to see her smile. I also had a feeling that I wanted to grab her attention. Apparently, The director had visited the hospital several times after my surgery, but he never made it to my room. I was surprised to hear from another nurse that Kathy had turned him away every time. I was nothing but grateful to Kathy. I was attracted to her. All the strategies I came up with to see her smile ended in failure. Whether I prepared a horse mask or practiced magic tricks, everything was a bust. When I shared my Make Kathy Laugh project with other nurses, the news spread throughout the hospital. Getting advice from other patients, brainstorming strategies together, my hospital life quickly became more fulfilling. Yesterday, finally, a seemingly exasperated Kathy told me to focus on my treatment since I'm the patient. From then on, every time I try to make her laugh, I get scolded with the same line. One day, as my discharge date was approaching, I got an urgent call on my cell phone from my colleague, Laura. There had been a customer who was a regular complainer, making numerous complaints every day, causing work to be disrupted. Normally, I would be the one dealing with this customer. The complaints were usually about simple things like wrong order or late delivery, nothing too serious. But this time, it seemed the customer was extremely angry because they received a different product than the one they ordered. I understand the situation, but I'm in the hospital. If you can't handle it, just escalate it to upper management. Let them deal with all of it, I advised. Normally, I could handle most complaints at my level. But this time, I'm afraid the bosses would have to step up. Laura said she would do that and hung up. The complainer was a guy named Mr. Ferguson, who ran a couple of bars and snack joints. He could be a bit tricky at times, but he wasn't unreasonable. As long as the first step in handling the complaint was correct, there shouldn't have been any problems. I've never experienced a complaint so severe that the phone didn't stop ringing for days. The day after Laura's call, my boss barged into my hospital room. He burst past the nurses who were trying to stop him, giving me quite a surprise. "Director, what's going on?" His forehead was covered in sweat, and his usually crisp suit looked somewhat worn out. "You've been handling that complainer and smoothing things over. It's your responsibility. Contact him and sort this out, now." He tossed the company's cell phone at me, which made me feel exasperated. I did not pick up the company's cell phone, so the director kept yelling at me, saying that I should be grateful that a useless person like me could be of use. I was starting to worry about causing a disturbance in the hospital. Reluctantly, I picked up the company's cell phone. "Is it you again? This is a hospital. Please, keep it down." Just as I was about to make the call, Kathy entered the room. The nurse who had initially tried to stop the boss had apparently fetched Kathy from another ward. She was stone cold, glaring at the director without flinching. With her imposing demeanor, the director was taken aback. "I'm giving this good-for-nothing some work. Don't meddle with company affairs. You're just a nurse." Just as the boss's tirade was coming to an end, Kathy swiftly grabbed the company's cell phone from my hand. Then she shoved it into the director's chest pocket, rather forcefully. "From this moment, this room is off-limits to visitors. Why don't you go back and do your own job?" Kathy said as she pushed the boss out of the room and closed the door behind him. I heard a click as a sign was hung on the doorknob. It must be a no-visitor sign. I could hear the director yelling outside the room. He made a ruckus for a while, but it seemed like he was escorted out by the security guards who came rushing. In the end, from what I heard from another nurse, he was even begging Nurse Kathy. I did feel a bit sorry for him, but I think it served as a good lesson for the director. Afterwards, it appears that the director got more complaints from a customer while handling a complaint. In the end, our regular client, Mr. Ferguson, said he would switch to another liquor store, effectively terminating his contract with us. It was a major blow to the company, and after a thorough investigation into the cause of the complaint, a revelation came to light. The director had rearranged the office on his own, and it seems a new and experienced worker had been put in charge of order reception. With no one to assist, the newbie was left to handle everything on their own. That's when the mistakes at the reception started piling up and caused the complaint. There are so many types of alcohol that you can't count them all. Without an experienced receptionist, it's difficult to understand specific wine brands. Normally, an experienced office worker would be assisting the newbie. But the director jumped the gun with the reorganization for cost-cutting, causing chaos throughout the office and the entire company. When the cause of the huge loss to the company was reported to the CEO, his reputation took a nosedive. Now he's been labeled as incompetent despite being an elite, and seems to be finding it hard to stay in the company. "What are you writing?" Kathy, who came to change my Ford drip, peered at my computer screen. "I'm writing my own know-how on dealing with complaints. The method varies depending on the customer. Now, that director seems to have been assigned to handle complaints. The director, while retaining his title, has been told to take the lead in handling complaints. A colleague told me that he's been tormented every day by troublesome complainants. I think it would be a plus for both the customers and the company if I could contribute to handling complaints in any way." "Are you going to aid the enemy?" I get slightly embarrassed as she tells me this with a somewhat unresolved look. I'd rather see a smile on your face than that shocked look. In the end, I never got to see a smile on Kathy's face during my hospital stay. After a hospital life of over a month, I finally reached the day of my discharge. The attending physician and nurses who took care of me in the ward see me off at the hospital entrance. I'm about to get emotional as I even receive a bouquet of flowers as a discharge celebration. Kathy is also here among the people seeing me off. With her usual emotionless face, she stares at me. "I've been in your care a lot, Kathy." When I stand in front of Kathy to express my gratitude, I end up witnessing something unbelievable. "You did well, John. Congratulations on your discharge." With that, she softly flashes a smile, as beautiful as a blossoming flower. I'm about to drop the bouquet in my hands from the surprise. I thought to myself, what a terrible woman she was at the end. After all the effort, she wouldn't smile at me, but at the moment we'd never see each other again, she shows me a smile. Memories of my hospitalization with her cross my mind one after another. Once I start to recall the fun moments, I can't hold back anymore. I burst into tears in reaction to her smile. Seeing this, the people sending me off start to roar with laughter. I'm so embarrassed. Unable to hold myself back, I crouch down on the spot. Well, do not cry like that. People who work hard deserve a little reward. This is just a bonus. Kathy whispers this while gently patting my crushed back. A piece of notepaper, roughly inscribed with her familiar handwriting, has her cell phone number on it, and she gently places it in my hand. Below it are the words, "Contact me if you feel like it. I'll be waiting." By the time I stop crying in surprise and look up, she's already returned to the send-off line, waving with her usual emotionless face. I wave back at everyone while expressing my thanks, then get into a taxi. In the moment I get in, I call Kathy's cell phone. "You're impatient, aren't you?" After 5 rings, she answers the phone with a soft chuckle. I hadn't thought about how to ask her out and can't find the words in my sudden panic. "Will you date me with the intention of marriage?" This was the first thing that came out. Even the taxi driver turns around in surprise. I'm so embarrassed I wish I could disappear into a hole. Isn't that a bit too hasty, but okay. Perhaps I found the treasure of my life in a hospital and I was too lucky. A few years later, I can't help but grin imagining her standing next to me in a white bridal dress. How did you enjoy today's story? Subscribe the channel and give us likes. It gives us motivation for our production activities. We're also looking forward to hearing your comments. See you again in the next video.